أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome again, dear viewing audience, to another segment from Al-Islam, the Perfected Way. Again, we sit here as a representative of Fame Media Group, friends and associates of Imam Warifdi Muhammad. I'm your host, Nimat Shaheed, and we are honored to have a special guest sharing in regards to some of the basic tenets of Al-Islam, the 5 pillars of Al-Islam. We want to encourage you, before we move on, to continue to watch our channel here on Our TV and to support both Our TV and Fame Media Group. Now, as I said a moment ago, there are some basic aspects to Al-Islam, the foundational pillar perspectives that come in 5. Our faith in identifying that there's only one God, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu, that we bear witness as Muslims. We bear witness that there is one God who is not in a human form, one God who is not a person who wasn't born, one God, one supreme being. We bear witness that there is one supreme being and that there are a line of messengers and prophets that God has sent and delivered to mankind to bring the word, to bring scripture, to bring understanding, and that last one, that there is a last one, and that last one is Muhammad, and we bear witness to that. As Muslims, you know, you've seen us, you've seen some things on the television around prayer, salat. We pray 5 times a day in a ritual form. There's a process to the prayer. There's something that we're saying in that prayer, that we're beseeching to God. We're reciting scriptures from our book, the Holy Quran. But in conjunction with that, we want to be in a prayerful mode. We always want to consider God. We refer to that as taqwa. Then, as in all forms of worship, there is a charity we call zakat. There's a percentage that we give from the funds that we've earned. There is another one in conjunction that's not a part of the pillars that is referred to as sadaqah, but the essence is that we want to be able to give and contribute to the work that promotes God, the idea of God, and sustaining the forums where persons can come and worship in a freedom space. Following that, which some of you may be familiar with, and maybe you may have practiced it in some form or another, is the fast, the siyam, where we are fasting for 30 days in the month of Ramadan. Then finally, at the end, we have the Hajj, which is quickly approaching. So those are the basic ideas of our 5 pillars of Al-Islam, and our special guest, Abdul Raoof Nasir, will be furthering our understanding and our discussion of it. In some regards, we will touch on the historical component of it. We will speak to the rituals in it, and then we will highlight some of the spiritual benefits from it. You know, in every way of worship, all of those 3 components are important. So if you're not a Muslim and you're a Christian or you're a Jew or whatever form of spiritual practice you have, be sure you understand the historical component, that you have understanding about the rituals that you're going through, and then what spiritual aspects that you're going to be benefiting from. That's the spirit of what we like to share with you today. And now I give to you our honorable friend and guest, Abdul Raoof Nasir. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Alhamdulillah.
I don't think we have to go any further. You gave an excellent summation of the principles, the basic principles of Islam, and so we can just fold up in.
No.
But since we have an hour
Yes.
to talk, we'll try to make some comments. I'm happy to be here, of course. This is my first time on True TV.
Alhamdulillah.
And I'd like to first give my shout out to Fame, the friends and associates of Imam Muhammad, of which I number myself as one. I came into the Islamic faith in when I was about 21 years old. I was in college, and I embraced the social reform movement of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which at that time was called the Nation of Islam, of course. And I was motivated by its strong cry for social justice, freedom and equality, and all those other excellent principles that it espoused. And looking back, of course, we recognize that it didn't so much as give us the details of the faith. It gave us an outline of the faith, which was actually accurate. The outline of the faith. In detail, there was some things to come, and so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, his movement was a more social reform movement than a movement to teach us the details of the religion. But even at that time, the pillars of Islam were well understood and practiced to a degree that we understood them at that time. I remember even in terms of prayer, I prayed as much then as I pray now, maybe and sometimes more because we were in some problematic situations. So from time to time, so but at least as much. We prayed the Fajr prayer, we prayed the morning prayer early in the morning before dawn, we prayed the afternoon prayer, we prayed every time we went out to contact the public. In terms of we had a lot of probably more contact with the public because we were salesmen. So every time we went out to friendly or hostile environments, we prayed. We prayed when we came back in. We prayed the afternoon prayer, the midday prayer, Dhuhr. We prayed the afternoon prayer, Asr. We prayed the sunset prayer called Maghrib, and we prayed the night prayer called Isha. So we were, I think, well prepared to encounter the more detailed explanation of the religion that we got after the passing of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his son, from which the name Fame comes from. Yes. He's the Imam Muhammad in the FAIM acronym Fame, the Friends and Associates of Imam Muhammad. Yes. Walter Muhammad, to be more specific, he opened up the details of the religion, made some corrections in our understanding, the first and foremost being the concept of God, which is the first principle of Islam, to which a person has to have an understanding to become a Muslim. It's a simple process, but it requires a clear understanding of that principle, which is called Shahadah. The Prophet of Islam, to whom the Quran was revealed, Muhammad, who lived 1400 years ago, and to whom was revealed this Quran in the month of Ramadan, which we'll comment on later, he clarified what God is, who God is, and that has to be understood, and the person has to make a declaration to that fact that they understand that yes. God is, as you said, the creator of the heavens and the earth, unseen. Yes. It's not in human form, cannot be manifested in human form, and to one to whom we will return in our death, and we will be judged, and we will be rewarded or punished according to the deeds that we lived in this life. So that simple principle of God, that's encapsulated in the phrase La ilaha illallah. There's no object of worship, or there's no ilah or object of worship except the Creator, Allah, in the Arabic language, the proper name for God being Allah. So this is the first of the 5 principles, sometimes called pillars. Prophet Muhammad said, Bunya al-Islam al-Khams, that the religion of Islam is built on 5. And then he articulated those 5 principles. The Shahadah, which is what we just discussed, the method in which one becomes a Muslim, they have to declare that they accept that principle first. And then I'll give you the Arabic terminology for our guests and our viewing audience. Salat, which is prayer. Simply explained as prayer, which is done 5 times a day. Zakat, which is actually a tax on the wealth over and above a person's needs.
Okay.
If one has more than they need to live, the legitimate needs of their life, the extra, anything over and above that is taxed at the rate of 2.5% for, in the simplest forms, 2.5%. So if you paid all your bills and you have $100 left over, 2.5% has to be given to the poor. So
That's
out of
beautiful.
$100,
Yes.
it's $2.50. So if you have $10 more than you need to live after you paid all your bills for the year,
Yes.
and you got $10 left over,
Yes.
then 2.5 cents belongs to the poor. So you have to give 3 pennies to the poor in charity.
Mashallah.
You got $100, you have to give $2.50. You got $1,000, you have to give $25 to the poor. So you can take it and find a poor person and give it to them. You can bring it to the mosque, and we'll distribute it for you because we have people coming all the time
Yes.
who are in need.
Yes.
And actually, the best persons to give it to are persons who are nearest to kin to you, because you get credit for
To your
giving
family.
to charity
Give that to your family.
that you don't have, not your immediate family, not your sons, because you have a responsibility of giving them
Okay.
anyway. But for other family members that are not your dependents, giving it to them because you not only give to the poor, but you also tighten the bonds of
Beautiful.
family.
Beautiful.
And this is a major principle in Islam.
Beautiful.
So that's the third principle. So we have Shahadah, declaration of faith. If you want to become a Muslim, you go and learn what Islam is at the mosque or from a Muslim or from a reliable source. Don't take what you see on television
Right.
because many times it's not a reliable source. But go to where Muslims are explaining the religion, sensible Muslims. Sensible Muslims are explaining the religion, and then if you agree with that, then you make that declaration, and then you begin to learn how to pray the Salat 5 times a day, and then once a year, then you take your income and decide whether you got more than what you need to live or less. If you have more than you need to live, the extra, as I said, if it's $100, $2.50 belongs to the poor. If you got $1,000. No, $100, yeah, $2.50. $1,000, $25. You got $10,000, $250. You got $100,000, $2,500 belongs to the poor, so on and so forth.
Yes, yes.
So it's actually a small sum, but a very effective sum if people are contributing. And then the focus of our talk, in some regards today, will be more focused on what we just completed, which is the month of fasting. It's called Siyam, or fasting, and of course we fast once a year for 30 days in the month, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, called Ramadan, and which we'll say more about presently. And then the 5th of the 5 pillars is called Hajj, or pilgrimage to Mecca, and that's required one time in a lifetime for those who are able to do it. So these 5 principles are the basis for. Some Muslims have different schools of thought, but all of the schools of thought, including the minority groups in Islam, almost unanimously agree on those 5 principles, and that's what makes us all Muslims. So. The angel Jibril, who is the messenger who brought the Quran to Muhammad, asked Muhammad once to explain what Islam is, and he explained, and when Muhammad gave the answer, he gave the same answer, that Islam was Shahadah, Salat, Zakat, Saum, which is fasting, and Hajj, to the house, whoever's able to do it. So there's no disagreement on that.
Can we just highlight a point around the angel Jibril is in English the angel Gabriel?
Gabriel would be the English equivalent, and in the Christian scriptures and in the Jewish scriptures. I think that name is used. The Arabic equivalent is Jibril. And let me say, even going back to Allah, Allah is the equivalent for God in Arabic. And even Christian Arabs, when they speak about God, they say Allah. So it points out, at least to those who are fair, that we all believe in the same God.
Right.
And that Allah, but Allah is said to be a name that contains all the complete attributes of what anybody, a person of true religion, would believe when they say God. They're not talking about a man.
Right.
They're not talking about an animal.
Right.
They're not talking about something in creation. They're not talking about creation. They're talking about creator.
Right.
And this is the focus of the belief in Allah or God. We'll use Allah for our discussion today for our audience. We want you to understand that when we say Allah, we mean the creator of the heavens and the earth.
And I think, and again, to just highlight that point for you audience, when we talk about worship, that and it was important that you understood that Jibril was Gabriel, that there are things that we share in faith. That is one of the reasons our programming is so important, so that you can learn more about us. We do study Christianity. We study all religions. You see books behind us in our homes. We have most of us have most of the scriptures. And so we're studying other scriptures, and we invite you to continue to listen and study with us while understanding that we share similar ideas in our belief and in the agents that work for God. And so we just wanted to highlight that for you. And so, and also one other thing I just thought, just backtracking for a moment, was so beautiful around the idea of zakat, of giving to the poor and or our kin. And, you know, that keeps your relatives from asking you for money, too, right? Right?
Yeah.
You have a couple of dollars.
Right.
You know, our family that's in difficulty,
yes, absolutely.
Sometimes they call us.
Right.
And that
all
if we are giving to them, you know, that is strengthening the bonds.
Right.
You know, because that means we're keeping an eye out on relatives and circumstances and situations, instead of saying, well, they have to live their own life. You're grown. I don't, you know, you let your husband, let your mother deal with it. That we are looking at our income and looking at our family and looking in the community and circumstances of those who have less, and we're giving to them. It is so beautiful.
Absolutely. One of the principles that's highlighted in Islam is keeping family ties together. And it's one of the problems of most distressed communities is the absence of that strong family bond that we used to have, especially African Americans.
Yes.
When we were in the South in the earlier days. Family bonds were just that they were strong bonds, and they help us to survive difficult times. Muhammad, the prophet to whom the Quran was revealed, when he came to when he migrated from Mecca to Medina, he gave a talk, and he started off by saying, "Ifsu salam," spread the greetings of peace. Give assalamu alaikum. When we say assalamu alaikum, that's the greetings of peace. He says, "Ifsu salam," and then he said, "Wa itimu ta'am," and then feed the poor, feed the poor people. Then he said, "Wasilu arham," and keep family ties together. And then he said, "Salu bil layl wa nas niyam," and pray at night when the people are asleep. And he said, "Tudkhil al-jannah bis salam," and you'll enter the paradise in peace. So these are these principles that are Islamic principles have spiritual value, but they have great social value too. They have, of course, the end product of we all want to go to heaven.
Right.
So, but you know, they're the saying, everybody want to go to heaven, don't nobody want to die. You don't actually have to die as literally to get into a more heavenly existence here on earth. And many of our communities are in a hellish condition here on earth because we've abandoned certain principles that will keep us more tied together and being more productive and being happier. And
Yes.
so these principles of Islam are not just spiritual principles for the end of life or afterlife. They're principles that have to actually make our life better while we're living.
While we're living here. And so, as we move to and towards the idea of fasting, what would you share about the month of Ramadan, some of the history, the rituals, and the important spiritual significance, as well as social impact that fasting would have on Muslims and those who may be observing it or living in the Muslim community?
Fasting is actually, we could say the same thing about each of these 5 pillars. They have multi-purposes, and not just one. It's not just for one thing. It's not just one benefit you derive from them. When there's a verse in the Quran, from anyone who doesn't have the Quran is the holy book of the Muslims. A copy is sitting on our desk here. There are 114 chapters in it, and in the second chapter, the 183rd verse, the second chapter is called the cow. In the 183rd verse, it reads, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. O you who believe, O you who have faith, fasting has been prescribed for you, it's been written for you. Kama ladina kutiba ala ladina min qablikum, like it was prescribed to those before your time. La'alakum tattaqun, in order that you may become more God conscious. The word you described earlier, tattaqun, to have more taqwa. And so this verse that is usually cited as a proof that all Muslims have to fast under certain conditions. And the conditions that you're not traveling, and that your health is sufficient to support going without food for 24 hours, not 24 hours from dawn until sunset, for 29 or 30 days. Those who are sick or on a journey, those who are elderly, those who have not reached puberty are exempted from fasting. But able-bodied Muslims who don't have those conditions, then we have to fast. And so fasting in Islam.
Did we include women who are pregnant?
Pregnant women, they can choose.
They can choose. Okay.
They have a selection. They choose to fast. They can fast, but they should do it under doctor's order, doctor's advice, along with doctor's advice. If they decide they don't want to fast, they make the days up from days that after they're in a condition where they can fast. The same with persons who are sick, except if you're chronically sick, then that means that you will never be able to fast if you have a chronic sickness. So for every day that you don't fast, you actually feed the poor.
Which is beautiful, yes.
Which is another social
beautiful.
connection with the fast. So it's not just for the person who is fasting who benefits, it's the environment, people in need in that person's environment also benefits. So and there are more benefits than that. But you find what was mentioned in the verse was that fasting is required for those who have faith or who believe, like it had been prescribed to all the faith communities before our time, not the Muslims, because Muhammad lived in the 6th century, and Islam began to unfold actually in the 7th century. He lived at the end of the 6th century. In the 7th century, when the revelations began to come to him, so there were faiths before Islam.
Right.
And so the verse mentioned that those people before Islam who had faith, for sure, the Christians and the Jews, but others too, they were required to fast. And we find fasting in all these faith communities. Just in doing some research, I looked in the Hans Weir dictionary, and it had called the Jewish fast, Eid al-Som al-Gufran. Eid Som al-Gufran is the reoccurring celebration of the fast of forgiveness. In Jewish theology, they call it the day of the fast. They call it Yom Kippur, Yom Kippur or Yom Kippur, and it's called the Day of Atonement.
Yes, the Day of Atonement.
So they're fasting to atone for sins they committed. That's that principle that's highlighted with the name Yom Kippur. The Christian fast was called Somul Kabir. It's called the Great Fast.
Yes.
And this day in Christianity, at least the major branch of Christianity with Catholicism,
yes,
it's called Lent.
Yes.
Lent. And I believe the greatness of this fast is referring to Jesus, whose name in Islam is Isa, but Jesus, on him be peace, it is said that he fasted for 40 days prior to the events that Christians believe transpired,
right,
which was the crucifixion and the resurrection. And though we have some issues with that interpretation, we know that this fasting that Christians do, but they only fast for, it's very, very minimal. They may fast, they say, well, okay, I like to eat
cake.
Yeah, so I'm not going to eat
any cake
for Lent. Or something, it could be
sacrifice a particular meal of
exactly.
some aspect of a meal that they may like.
Exactly. So actually, this is in a way reenacting, because in Jesus' 40-day fast, as the biblical story goes, he was tempted by Satan, and he was able to overcome the temptations through his self-discipline and his spiritual acumen. And so this is an effort to grow that in the believers of Christianity. The Islamic fast, as I say, is probably more comprehensive than both the Jewish fast and the Christian fast, and many of the other fasts in the other faith group, whether in Buddhism or Hinduism or Sikhism, these other faiths that actually have fast traditions, because the Islamic fast is for 30 days or 29 days based on the lunar month, which is based on the appearance of a new moon and the moon going through its monthly cycle, which
the
takes
new moon being just the slither,
the new moon is the
not
crescent.
the full moon, but just the slither.
It's the crescent. It's the crescent. That's called the hilal. And in most Islamic schools of thought, they believe that hilal has to be sighted to start the fast. The fast happens every year in the 9th cycle of the hilal, or the 9th month of the hilal, which is called Ramadan. So some people call the fast Ramadan, but actually the fast is in the month of Ramadan, and it lasts for 29 days or until the new moon of the next month is sighted, and then that fast is over. So this is the Islamic fast, and it contains all those ideas both those ideas that we have in Christianity and Judaism is contained in the fast. We fast for forgiveness of sins. We fast to strengthen ourselves against the temptations of the world, of the Satan, of the devil in Christian language, or even Islamic language. It's called shaitan. So we fast to strengthen ourselves. We fast to get closer to God. Because it is said that we fast in order to get to that goal, which is paradise. One of the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, to whom the Quran came, he says the first part of the month is mercy, and the middle part of the month, of the 30-day month, is forgiveness, and the last part of the month is salvation from the fire of hell. So, as it is with all the principles of Islam, there's a component of purification, spiritual purification, from Shahadah, from Salat, from Zakat, from fasting, which is our subject, and from Hajj, because the Prophet once was asked by a man who was contemplating entering Islam. He said he would enter Islam, he would take the Shahadah if he could be if the Prophet could guarantee him he would be forgiven for the sins he had committed before. And the Prophet said, haven't you heard that whoever enters Islam, his previous sins are forgiven, as long as he doesn't continue to commit them after Islam?
Right.
So the Shahadah, his entering, So when you enter in Islam, you take the Shahadah, even without doing other acts. If you're sincere, then your sins, your previous sins that you gave, that you did, are forgiven, as long as you don't continue to do them after you enter Islam. So that's a purification. The Prophet said about when I say the Prophet, I mean Prophet Muhammad, because we believe in many prophets. There are 25 that are mentioned in the Quran, and there's also a verse in the Quran that says some of the prophets we told you about and some of them we haven't told you about. So Muslims have to believe even in some of those prophets that are not mentioned in the Quran by name.
Yes.
So we have to have a broad spectrum. But the prophet that I'm referring to now is Prophet Muhammad, to whom the Quran was revealed. The Prophet said that if there was if a person had a tree, if they had a shower, and when they bathed in there was a river running from their house, and they bathed in it 5 times a day, would there be any dirt on them? In the response of the audience of his class, they said no, there wouldn't be any dirt on the person who bathed 5 times a day. He said that's what happens when you perform the 5 prayers. I'm using paraphrasing, of course,
right.
But he said this is what happens when you when you do the 5 prayers. So the 5 prayers act as a purification from sins that have been committed. The word zakat itself means to purify, to be pure. Yuzakihim. It said that one of the goals of the prophets and all the prophets was to teach the people and to yuzakihim, and to purify them and teach them the book and the wisdom. So the word for this charity that we do is called zakat. It means to grow. It means to be pure also. So when a person gives zakat, it purifies their wealth. So if you're in a position where you have more money than you need to live, and you don't give what's due to the poor, which is 2.5% of above your means, then that means even the money that you have is not pure. It's considered impure. But if you give that zakat, it purifies your money. And then another fantastic piece of information the Prophet passed on as follows. He said that your money is not decreased by giving it away.
That's right.
He mentioned the term sadaqah.
Right.
He said your money is not decreased by giving it away. And he also said giving sadaqah removes sins like water puts out fire. So these again alluded to the fact that the sadaqah purifies us. The fasting, of course, we mentioned that at the end of Ramadan, we feel it says that the faster, his sins, especially in the last 10 days of Ramadan, a special day when the day that it is said that the revelation actually came, the night that the revelation actually came, whoever prays on that night out of sincerity and seeking forgiveness, Allah forgives their sins for that night. And of course, all of Ramadan also has the same function. And then the pilgrimage to Mecca, which is the 5th principle.
Before we go to the pilgrimage, let's share with the audience. I know some of them are probably wondering why we pray or we fast in different seasons. Sometimes it's in the winter, sometimes it's in the summer. And share a little bit about the movement of the moon and as it affects Ramadan.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. We actually fast the same time every year. We fast in the 9th cycle of the moon. But when you compare that to the calendar that is used in the West, which is the solar calendar, we fast according to a lunar calendar, which is according to the cycles of the moon. And there are 12 cycles of the moon. Each of those cycles has a name. The 9th cycle is called Ramadan. The 10th cycle is called Shawwal. The 11th cycle is called Dhul Qa'dah. And the 12th cycle is called Dhul Hijjah. And then a new year begins, which starts with the cycle or the month. And each of the cycles is a month. It's called Muharram. So the lunar cycle is 354 or 55 days.
355 days, okay.
The solar calendar, the one we use, January, February, March, April, May, is always 365 days, except for leap year when it's different. So the lunar calendar
so it's about a 10
or 11
day, 11 day difference.
And so it looks like Ramadan comes 11 days earlier every year.
It does look like that.
So now, next year, we started fasting this year on May the 25th.
Okay.
On the night of May 25th. Another point to be made that we went without food on the 26th, but on the 25th was, I think, the first night.
First night.
Yeah. Or it might have been 26 and 27 now that I think about it. But at any rate, so next year, we know if it started on the 25th this year, it's going to start about the 15th of May next year. Ramadan is going to start about
earlier. On the solar calendar.
On the solar calendar, we're going to start. So it appears that it's coming earlier every year, but that's just going to be 12 cycles or 12 months from when we started this year, exactly the same time. So over the course of 33 years, if you live over the course of 33 years, then you actually will have fasted throughout all the seasons of the year. As it takes about 33 and some change to fast. And some of those months will be long months. I mean, days, long days. Yes. Like in the summertime, when you have when Fajr at its earliest time is about 4:20 in the morning, a little after 4 in the morning, and it goes until almost 9 o'clock at night. That's in the summer, and so those months provide a different challenge than when you're fasting in the winter, when the shortest day of the winter is December 21st. That's the shortest day, in which sun rises maybe 6:40, 6:50, almost close to 7 o'clock, and sunset will be about 4:20, 4:30. So you have shorter days, longer nights, and then in the summer you have longer days, shorter nights, but both provide a challenge, and so you have to go through the challenges of life.
Yes.
And so a lot of this is a metaphor for life. You know, you have to provide a challenge, and you provided a different challenge depending on seasons as the seasons change. And but you have to do the same thing. You have to be steadfast. You have to be disciplined. You have to be devoted. You have to be charitable. All these things that are represented in Ramadan, you have to do throughout the whole life. And on an aside, it's not really an aside, but our leader, which Fame, the name Fame, takes part of its acronym, Imam Muhammad, he became the leader in 1975. He died in 2008. 33 years from the time he began his leadership. So we started fasting, I think in September when he first became the leader, and then the year he died, we were fasting in September again. So he had taken us through the whole cyclical struggle to learn, of which we're still doing. We're trying to learn and promote and live Islam as best we can. But some thinkers believe that's significant, a sign, because everything's a sign. Like Allah says about the Quran. You have to read signs in what you encounter in life. And we believe that's a very, very large sign about the significance of that person who actually introduced the religion in this more detailed way that we're trying to explain to our audience today. Not taking anything away from what went before, but what was before was more preparatory for us getting the detail about Islam. When you have a people who are so misused as we were up into the 1920s, 30s. In fact, this happened at the time of the Great Depression. It said that the teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, came and introduced himself to the ghettos of Detroit and Black Bottom in Detroit, which is the worst of the worst communities. And
Black Bottom, Detroit.
And yeah, this was called Black Bottom. It's like in West Oakland, they called it the Lower Bottom.
Oh, okay.
You know, this where it represents the worst community that you can be in that particular neighborhood or
Right.
whatever. And so that's where he went first, and he began to his social reform movement. So we believe that that first part was more a social reform movement, so that we can understand, so we can be a little bit more clear-headed when the details of the religion came in the way that his son began to introduce them. Allah knows best. This
Yes.
one theory by some of the thinkers.
So what about Hajj? How does then, when we move from Ramadan, that we're just stepping away from, let's step towards Hajj, and then at the end of that, talk about the Eids, because there are two Eids, two forms of celebrations that we have as Muslims. And this once in a lifetime journey called Hajj.
Hajj is all the principles are great. Whichever one you're talking about is the greatest
Yes,
at the time.
It is.
So Ramadan Ramadan ends with a great celebration on the day after the new moon is sighted, ending Ramadan. And there's a celebration that's called Eid, which means something that reoccurs yearly. So this Eid is called the Eid al-Fitr, which is the Eid of the term Fitr actually refers to the natural disposition or nature or the natural disposition of the human being. So after going through this rigorous discipline, devotional challenge for 29 days to restrict our physical intake of food and drink, and also sexual relations. You can't have sexual relations in the daylight hours during the time of fasting. And this is why we say the Islamic fast is very, very comprehensive. Very few of the other fasts require this level of discipline. And this is with your spouse. You during the daylight hours. And of course, if that's not your spouse, you can't have it daylight or not daylight, because the idea is you should marry. The Prophet, peace be upon him, says that one who reaches the age of puberty, then they should begin to think in terms of being married. So at any rate, this is the going without food, drink, and sex during the daylight hours is part of Ramadan. So we have a celebration at the end called the Eid, and this is called the Eid of returning to this form. So the implication to me is that after going through this rigorous discipline, you come back closer to the form that God created you in, if you do Ramadan correctly. And when we know that form, everybody was born in that form. Because Prophet Muhammad said everybody was born with that form, no matter whether you are declared Muslim or you're a Christian or you're atheist, everybody was born on this pattern that's called the fitr.
It's this nature of
It's the
self.
nature of the human being. It's the nature that God created all human beings, and everybody was created with the same pattern, regardless of race, regardless of gender. Doesn't make a difference. Everybody was born in that way.
And then the other, when we go back to the other pillars, and what you shared around purification, they are all helping one to return in or purify themselves. But then when we get to the fast, it then is at its conclusion a signal of sort of this restoration that has occurred.
Absolutely.
So the practice then of the rituals in the religion help one to not only physically return, because the fasting is going to affect our body, it's going to have an impact on us on the cellular level and the spiritual level. That's then moving the human being forward in a more pure, progressive way. I'm not sure if but I want the audience to see that what it is that we're doing isn't as a straitjacket, but it serves a purpose in order to help restore ourselves. I think the idea around the washing 5 times a day and the cleanliness behind it really highlights that everything that we do is in order to take that coal and make it into a diamond, to polish and bring out the essence and the aspects of our self that is pleasing to God and affects those in society that we live with and around in a way that's positive and productive.
And this is one of the, it is said that, because we're transitioning to talking about Hajj, and we're going to be jumping forward and going back in order to try to make a point here, because it says the one who completes this journey to Mecca and performs the rituals as they should be performed, their rites, rituals, and with the right, not only the performance, but the right spirit while you're performing, because it said that whoever goes to Hajj they shouldn't argue, they shouldn't have rancor, they shouldn't commit sins and what have you. And it says, but there's a long series of rituals you have to perform. Hajj consists of 5 days of intense rituals. You go into a devoted state in the 12th month of the Islamic year, which is called Dhul Hijjah, as we say it. Then the rituals begin. You have to be in Mecca or its environment at that time on the 8th day of Dhul Hijjah.
Mecca in Saudi Arabia.
In Saudi Arabia, or Arabia, that the Saudis call Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
But the original name was Arabia, because this name was there before
the Saudis.
These modern names began placed on them. The Saudis are a family, they're a tribe who got political ascendancy, and they placed their name on that landmass. But Arabia is an ancient name that was there perhaps when Mecca was founded. The rituals of Hajj are focused on the history of that place in the founding of Mecca, which was a barren land without vegetation, when the prophet Abraham, on him be peace, and his African wife Hagar, and their son Ishmael, on him be peace, who also, of course, is considered a prophet in Islam, when they were first brought to that area, and the African lady Hagar, the mother of Ishmael and the wife of Abraham, he returned to, he had 2 wives at the time. So he returned
Sarah
to the place
being one,
Sarah was
as
one,
we recognize in the Bible.
Right. She was, and in the Quran.
In the Quran. She's not named in the Quran.
Neither is Hagar named.
This is true.
But in the traditions, they're both named, both in Christianity and in Islam. But there's a slightly different narrative, of course, about the details.
Yeah, the details, yes.
But in the Islamic narrative, then the African lady was brought to this valley by her husband, Abraham, along with her son, Ishmael, when she was still breastfeeding. And she was left in this barren land by her husband. As he left, she asked, and he left her with some provision, "Why are you leaving us here?" And he didn't answer. She asked again, "Why are you leaving us here?" Of course. And then she again asked, "Why are you leaving us here?" And he turned. And then she thought, because she understood this was a man who always operated on what he thought was God's order to him.
Yes.
And so he turned in and says, and so she says, "God ordered you to do this?" And then he turned. And then she realized, and she was a devoted person also. She said, if God ordered you this, then she was okay with it.
She was okay with it.
In modern language.
Yeah.
Then he would provide for them.
Yes, God would provide.
God would provide for them.
Yes.
And so Abraham left, and as it was, after the provisions that Abraham left began to be depleted, she became anxious for the baby, and so she laid the baby down, and she went to look for help from people or the environment. And it said that she ran between 2 high places to see whether she could see if any help was on the horizon. And she saw a hill, she ran to the hill, she looked, and she saw another hill about a quarter of a mile away. She ran there and she looked, and in her effort to find help, she ran back between these two high places 7 times.
Yes.
And the Islamic narrative is that when she returned to where the baby was, water began to come up from where the baby was sitting. There are different accounts on how it happened. Some say the angel came and dug his wing. The others say the baby dug his foot in the sand. But important, they all agree that water began to come up from that place. And so she began to try to control the flow of the water because it was coming profusely, and she was able to do it. She was able to fill up her water skins, and then she was able to, that water provided a source of nutrition and for help for the baby and the African lady. That source of water still flows today,
yes.
And one of the rituals that you do when you go to Mecca, you drink from that source of water. Is a well. It's called the well of Zamzam. The water is called Zamzam. Some say she used that term in trying to control the water. There's long stories about that, but it's called the well of Zamzam. And so the 2 hills that the lady ran between have names, and they're incorporated in the rituals. When you go to Mecca, you have to reenact her struggle to find, because this is she was the one who founded Mecca. They were the first inhabitants. There were no inhabitants there. There were only wanderers in the desert coming back and forth, the Bedouins of the Arab, because there was no nothing to sustain life.
Right.
But when this water was found, and then the wandering tribes came there and they saw the water, they asked the lady, could they, through signs, could they satisfy their thirst? And she allowed them through signs, because she didn't speak the language. She was from Africa. The baby didn't have no language.
Right.
And so she allowed one of the tribes to come and to satisfy their thirst, and then they asked could they pitch their tents around the water. This was their habit. They would go from place to place, and Bedouins, they go and they find the water, they stay there for a while. When the water's exhausted, they move to the next place. And so they came there, and they were allowed to stay, pitch their tents. They were the first to build homes around there, these tents around in this valley. And eventually they taught the African lady the language, and taught the son the language. And eventually the son, Ismail, who later became Prophet Ismail, of course, alayhi salam, on him be peace, he married a girl from that tribe. And so they became the custodians of this place. That grew into Mecca. This is how Mecca began. It was founded by the African lady and her son Ismail. Prophet Abraham, he would come and he would return periodically. And over the course of years, he received instructions from God to build a house here in this place. There was no house, no residence, only the tents of the Bedouins, the well of Zamzam, the 2 mountains. And so when the boy got old enough to help him, he employed him to help him build this house. And the house was built. It's a cubic structure. That's a simple cubic structure. And it was dedicated to the concept of God that the Prophet Abraham had lived his whole life trying to promote and trying to grow wherever he went. And he had traveled from his ancient land, and they couldn't accept this concept of God as being the creator of the heaven and earth. So this was the structure that was built, and it's there today, still there today. It's called the Kaaba. And this is the central focus of our pilgrimage to Mecca. We actually go there and we circumambulate around this house that was built by the Prophet Abraham, his son Ismail, but in the land that was founded by his African wife,
yes,
and populated by his son and their descendants through this tribe that has a name, but too many names right now we don't need, but another time we can tell you the names. And they became the custodians, the guardians of this place. And they passed that responsibility down from generation to generation.
So when we go to Hajj today, as we're nearing the top of the hour, what is it that one would see on Hajj today?
Well, we start talking about the days of the rituals that you have to reenact. There are 5 days. In the first day, you actually go and you run between these two hills. You go around the Kaaba first. You pray at a place where it is said that the prophet Abraham, he stood in order to help build the building. His footprints are still embedded there. You have to go there and you have to stand in his place, symbolically standing in that place.
Yes.
And you have to pray there. So the Quran says, and take the place of Abraham, or the station of Abraham,
yes, Maqam
as a
Ibrahim.
place
Yes.
of prayer.
Yes.
And he said, whoever enters it is safe. Whoever enters it is safe. He finds security. It's a big meaning to it. It's not this. It's a ritual that we perform.
Not just the place
it's not just that
but
place, right?
this way of being, as
this
you
way
talked
of
about,
thinking
fitra,
about God.
this restoring of oneself in relationship
Right.
with God,
Having
as
the proper,
Abraham had.
having the proper concept of God first.
Yes.
And all that flows from that.
Yes.
The prophet Abraham is a symbol, not only in Islam, but in Christianity and Judaism and other faiths of that concept. We're called monotheistic religions.
Yes, yes.
The people who believe in one God, not many gods.
Right.
And that God is creator, not creation.
Yes.
This is the key point.
Yes.
Even though in some monotheistic religions, the idea hasn't maintained its purity. But in Islam, there's a strong effort to maintain the purity of that belief, and Prophet Abraham is a symbol of that, and his descendants. So Hajj is a representation of how to maintain that.
Yes.
And so every day in Hajj, you're doing something that's involved. You're enacting a ritual that symbolizes that struggle. The next day, you go to a place called Arafat. And it said that this place, which is the most important day of Hajj. So the 9th, 8th day, you're at Mecca, actually outside Mecca. And then the 9th day, you're at a place called Arafat. Arafat means to come into knowledge. Arafat means to become aware, to become knowledgeable. And this is said the most important day of Hajj. And this is where everybody is there making their plea for forgiveness to Allah and for whatever they want in their life.
Praying for others.
Mundane and also spiritual. It could be, I want, help me find a good job when I get back. Or even more spiritual goals than that. But at any rate, people are praying there on that day, and that's the most important day of Hajj, on the 9th. And then the next day is the most important day for people who don't go to Hajj. Because as we mentioned, there are 2 celebrations we have. Yes. One at the end of Ramadan that we celebrated after fasting and coming back into this fitr. And this one is called the Eid al-Adha. Adha. And the Adha refers to the sacrifice that was made when Prophet Abraham was challenged by a dream he had from God. And he interpreted the dream that he had to sacrifice his son, who he loved. He only had one son at the time. And he loved that son, But in his dream, he interpreted that, I can't put my son ahead of my obedience to God. God has ordered me to do this. So this became a great challenge to him, as it is to all of us. We get challenged sometimes with situations we come into, and we believe God is moving in one direction, but our inclinations, our habits or whatever is moving in another direction. So you have to solve this problem. What do you do? So Abraham chose to be obedient to God. And so he was going to obey the sacrifice. He was going to actually sacrifice his son. But it said that the Quran says, as they both, because he consulted with his son. God has ordered me to do this. And what do you think? He was going to be sacrificed. The boy said, do what you've been ordered to do, and you'll find me patient. Because he was going to be.
Yes.
But then Allah says in the Quran that when they had both submitted, otherwise he had submitted to be obedient to God, the boy had submitted to be sacrificed even though it meant his life. Yes. He said then Allah said they had fulfilled what Allah wanted from them. So many times God just wants us to be obedient.
Wants us to be
And
obedient.
He challenges us with
to wrestle with our
choices.
own self
Absolutely.
and then to submit.
Yeah.
We have about 3-4 more minutes. How
In
would
the
you?
whole, in the whole thing.
We are, alhamdulillah. We'll have to have you back when. So in a
So
how would
okay,
you
now
capture
let me
the end of Hajj?
okay. At the end of Hajj, in the end of Hajj, okay. Now we have
or capture the pieces as we move towards
we
the
have
end.
another symbolic struggle that we have to undertake after the day of the sacrifice. As soon as that day, for the people who are not on Hajj, we're celebrating, we're reenacting the sacrifice. We're sacrificing animals where we are, giving them, feeding the poor, and the sacrifice is another way of us connecting with the members of our community.
Yes.
We slaughter and we feed the poor. We feed the poor from our families first. We see it as most beneficial. But then those who are strangers and whoever who is in need, we feed them from the sacrifice animals that we sacrifice. So this is on the 10th day. So the 8th, 9th, the 9th is the most important. 10th is the day of the celebration and the sacrifice. And then you immediately go and you have to fight the devil.
Yes.
There are 3 pillars that represent Satan in different stages of his manifestations. And you have to go and you have to pick up stones and you throw them at these symbols of Satan. And on the first day, not curiously, but instructively, you don't go at the little one, you get the big one first. You go to the big one first, and you get that one the first day. And then on the subsequent days, which are the 11th and the 12th, then you throw in all 3. The middle, the middle, and the small one. And then if you stay, you have some options in Hajj. You can stay for 5 or 6 days. But at the end of it, to reiterate the point that we said, all the principles have to do with purification and putting us in that human state that God intended for us to be in. It says whoever performs these rituals, all of what we named and some more that we didn't name, then they say they return at the day that their mother, like they were the day that their mother birthed them. So they again connecting us to the fitr, because when Prophet Muhammad said, every child is born on this pattern.
Yes.
And then the environments we come up take us out of the patterns. We become this or that, and different religions and different ethnicities, and all this becomes more important to us than it should be, when we were all one under the same pattern called this fitr when God created us. So at the end of Hajj, this is what is said, that the person who does the Hajj correctly and perceives some of these subtleties in the right way, then they come back like that, or closer to that, we like to say. It's an ongoing process, but the pillars of Islam are Imam Shaheed likes to say what's that word he uses? Can't think of it now. We have the campaign to raise money there. It's called algorithm. Yes.
Oh, okay.
An algorithm. All the 5 principles are algorithms to getting us back to this.
I like that word.
That shape, that form that God created us in, and therefore being more human. I mean, being human is the key to all this.
Yes.
And the best of human beings can be seen in children.
Yes.
Very young children. They're not racist.
Right.
They're not killers, and they're not robbers.
No.
They're not liars.
They're not.
They hate impurity.
Yes.
They cry when they get dirty.
They're not clean. Yes.
Yes. They love mother.
Yes.
They love father.
Yes. They listen.
They listen. They're curious.
They're curious.
All these things that are the key for human beings. Their minds are beginning to grow. We find in great form in children. And this is that fitr. This is the at least an analogy for the fitr.
All right, alhamdulillah.
It's an analogy for the fitr.
We're gonna have to conclude.
Okay.
I know you enjoyed it. I'm enjoying it as well. We want to encourage you to continue to view Al-Islam, the Perfected Way, here on our TV. This is Nimat Shaheed, Sheikh Abdul Raoof Nasir, and we'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.